Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to the Duval Dive. We appreciate you guys joining us on this beautiful, beautiful Monday. We didn't really have an episode scheduled for you guys today with the great episode that we had, featuring Jordan DeLugo of Generation Jags. Stopped through to discuss the differences and the similarities for Texans quarterback CJ Stroud and Jacksonville Jaguars quarterback one Trevor Lawrence. And we thought this might have been a good time to kind of have one of those mailbag episodes, but with all the interaction and all the hate received from the local and the national fans, we figured this might be a good time to kind of have that we'll call it a mailbag-ish reaction episode to some of the statements that were made, kind of figure out and have the conversation around whether or not they hold water, and just let the folks get the hate off their heart before this training camp kickoff. So we wanted to kind of get into a few of those things. But again, shout out to Jordan DeLugo for stopping in with us last week, and we hope to have him on more often. Shout out to Nash joining his day off with the family, man. And this is some good stuff. But yeah, let's get into it, bro. So as we already know, exaggeration alert, exaggeration alert, exaggeration alert. Fans are fanatic. Fans don't care about facts. They just get the hate off your heart. But we got Joe on the Jaguars. On the Duval Dive TikTok. Trevor Lawrence has gotten all the grace in the world, too much in my opinion, which is arguable, but I can understand it from an outside perspective. Man, we got Jay Silva on the TikTok. Jesus, Jags fans just can't accept the fact that Trevor is dog water. Woo. All right. Yeah, get the feelings off your chest. All right, I got you. Eric Sanchez, just get over the fact that Trevor Lawrence will never be a star, but he will always be solid. All right. You got Wayne Joyner. Quit making excuses for Trevor. Admit he's not a very good quarterback. He's average at best. I mean, I guess that's not necessarily hated. At least it's kind of mid. But all right. You got MB Gig, which is T-Law has done nothing and will continue to do nothing, brother. I'm sorry to break it to you. The AFC South is legit owned by the Texans for the next 10 years. T-Law stinks, brother. Which, all right, cool. If you truly believe that, bro, Godspeed to you. Like, I don't even know what to say to that. But yeah, again, fans are fanatic. They don't care about facts. They don't care about nothing else. They just want to get these takes off. I understand it. But also, we got people on the other side of the line. You got Zach, part of the Duval, saying Trevor is better. Stroud is probably one of the most overrated quarterbacks in the league, which, I mean, that's the opposite end of that hate. That's the opposite end of that take. Like, I don't know where to land on that one, but both sides seem a little like they got a little too much spice to them. But I understand the fever. I understand the fandom. And finally, Peter Perrin, 88, Jags not making the playoffs with Lawrence, which is the weirdest response out of all of them, seeing as the Jaguars have made the playoffs with Trevor Lawrence. But okay, again, a little odd, but I understand it. But let's get into the responses that have some true substance, the responses that need, like, I think that at least deserve to be dug into a little bit, so we can kind of have a real conversation on where Trevor Lawrence lands in this whole landscape of Trevor Lawrence versus CJ Stroud versus the rest of the NFL. So we got Sunday night games, YT, which states Trevor is closest to Daniel Jones if you want to compare. Which, oh man, that narrative will not die. Since the 2020 end of the 2023 season, many folks have been making that ridiculous comparison based on Trevor Lawrence's rookie season, weighing down his first 2 years in the league. So I believe it was CBS Sports that originally cited that comparison, which basically stated that Trevor Lawrence and Daniel Jones were essentially the same person due to their first 2 years in the league. And I always think it's interesting when people just they play with the stats. They try to make it look like one thing, but then they avoid the more recent, kind of situation. So I think this is going to be curious because I'm like, all right, wait a minute. Why do we stop at the first 2 years when there's someone who has more years to compare? The reason we stop the comparisons with Trevor Lawrence and CJ Stroud is because CJ Stroud only has 2 years in the league. So that makes more sense. With Daniel Jones and Trevor Lawrence, they both had multiple years. So we had this conversation at the end of the 2024 season. Trevor Lawrence destroys Daniel Jones, and we have more, like, when they have the equal amount of games to play, Trevor Lawrence basically wins in every passing category. They're basically the same as far as completion percentage, and they're basically, Trevor Lawrence is 5 points higher as far as quarterback rate is concerned. They have nearly even the same amount of rush TDs. So we have already had that conversation. So I think that's not even worth digging into too much. But again, fans gonna fan and they gonna say what they gotta say, bro. Them takes ain't gonna make themselves. So I get it. It is what it is. But yeah, it doesn't hold water. Next one. Uh, Nico Collins wasn't Nico when he got to the NFL. This is from Jay on the Duval Dive TikTok. Tank Dell was a rookie. He had a first-time defensive head coach. From the outside looking in, his best weapons in his rookie year was Noah Brown, Damian Pierce. Let's not act like CJ walked into a perfect situation. He made it better. And actually, I think this is a pretty reasonable take. Like, yeah, the Nico Collins wasn't what he was before CJ Stroud got there. I think that's actually very reasonable. But at the end of the day, the Houston Texans in that season were leaning into their rookie class. Like they were leaning into their rookie class with Tank Dell. They were hoping to see more from Nico Collins because he actually didn't have a terrible quarterback like as he did in his previous 2 seasons. So yes, Nico Collins was better than folks saw him statistically on the field because he just didn't have anybody to get him the ball. I think that's actually very fair. But also, Tank Dell exists. So when we're saying that, the other receivers were technically speaking his most proven receivers, I don't think that's necessarily off, but I also don't think that fully tells the story. It's not significantly different than many other teams, like even the Rams, like they were leaning to someone like the Puka Nakua, but they didn't know he was going to be that. But yeah, they leaned into it. And that's kind of the overall point. So my overall argument originally was not that CJ Stroud has such a better situation than Trevor Lawrence. No, I think they were actually reasonably the same. And I think they performed reasonably the same. And that is literally my argument from the start of this. It's not that this one's better than that one or that one's better than this one. I think they're the same guy, just giving way two different levels of smoke. And that's kind of where I'm landing on this bad boy. But also, let's acknowledge this. Bobby Slovic coming in, yes, was a first-time offensive coordinator, but also from the Kyle Shanahan system. And I'm sorry, you're going to get a little bit of an extra credit, a little bit of bonus just because of that. And I have to say this point. Folks are consistently using Doug Peterson's 2017 Super Bowl to basically they're using it as a proxy to crap on Trevor Lawrence, and I think it's disingenuous and it's unfair at bare minimum. Because fact of the matter is, most NFL fan bases, especially in Duval County, I can definitely speak for the Duval devout, did not want Doug Peterson when he was originally hired. Most NFL fan bases would not have been a fan of hiring Doug Peterson when he was hired, and I think we all know that. So we can't really rewrite history just because he did win that Super Bowl when he also never changed his offense. He never evolved his offense from the original offense that won him that Super Bowl. You've seen the Golden Take interviews talking about the state of that Philadelphia Eagles locker room in the following season, the following 2 seasons. I'm sorry. You've seen those, so we know that there was some strife within that locker room getting it right. There was issues as far as evolving that offense. So whether or not Doug Peterson was this incredible coach or whether he was just this guy who was going to be able to give Trevor Lawrence a good base to start with are different conversations. I think that's exactly what Doug Peterson was. He was a great bridge coach. But again, I think folks keep talking about this Doug Peterson. He was a Super Bowl winning head coach, whereas you had Ryan, who was uh, first time defensive head coach, which great defensive coordinator. He gave the Texans a great defense to start working with, which is a great base. Jacksonville has never had that. Um, I think that's worth discussing because at the end of all of this, Bobby Slovic was before the 2024 season. Let's be clear about this. Houston Texans fans were dancing in the streets, happy as can be, that he wasn't getting head coach interviews. Let's not forget that happened because Houston Texans fans were angry with the thought, with the thought of that they could lose him and have to start over. And now, 1 season later, everyone's saying he was the worst offensive coordinator in the league. He was terrible. He was this. He was that. Nah, bro. No. Keep it 100. Let's keep it how it was at that time. I was in your spaces. I was talking to people in the Houston media. Nah, y'all love Bobby Slovic. Y'all love that Kyle Shanahan offense. He was not able to counter and evolve that offense no different than Doug Peterson. They are very similar. They are the same. One just won a Super Bowl on the back of a backup quarterback lighting it on fire and hitting the right situation at the right time. So let's keep it 100. Let's keep it a buck. They are very similar. Next up, we have Sound Off on Blue Sky. You are correct about the defenses the Texans have built around Stroud. What you don't want is your quarterback making stupid turnovers at the wrong time in close games. The criticism I would have of Trev is touch and not knowing his limitations, which I think many Jacksonville Jaguar fans would actually agree with that. Trevor Lawrence's, especially his early on turnovers, that rookie season, the first half of that 2022 season, and even a few of the turnovers in the reasonably good 23 season. Um, you could argue that, hey, man, yeah, it was some rough stuff on that film, not significantly different than you see from someone like a Josh Allen in Buffalo, except Josh Allen was putting up crazy touchdown numbers, so I get why that's a little different. But we also did talk about Trevor Lawrence's turnovers in that 2023 season in depth, both on BigCatCountry.com and on my Travis D. Holmes on Twitter, because Trevor Lawrence's interceptions in that 2024 season were, sorry, at the end of that 2023 season, he had 14 interceptions, but realistically, only 4 of them were actually on him. Like, they had a boatload of miscommunications. They had that 3-minute, I guess we'll call it a low light film, with tip balls and balls coming off of running backs' face masks. Looking at Tank Bigsby. I'm sorry, and just those kind of tight end and miscommunications from guys and not being in the right spots and those kinds of things that were happening within that Doug Peterson offense. So it's not all on Trevor Lawrence as far as those interceptions, but he still will have those bonehead ones for sure, like in the red zone where it's just like you can't throw that, things of that nature. Like, some quarterbacks just have those issues, and you're going to have to swallow it and deal with it. I fully get that, but I don't think it's as bad. The difference between the two are as bad as folks may realize, just because Trevor Lawrence has those other things in his supporting cast that's kind of not helping the whole situation. But it's still a reasonably fair point, and I want to make sure I acknowledge that also. Trevor Lawrence's biggest issue, in my personal opinion, and I talked about this in my deep dive before the 2024 season, is his fumbling. And that's just going to have to be rectified, keeping the ball a little bit higher, being a little bit more protective with it as far as that piece is concerned, and also the supporting cast hustling behind him to actually recover those fumbles. Again, we had a deep dive on Big Cat Country, talked about that. While the Jacksonville Jaguars he might have had a fumbling problem, but also the team overall had a fumble recovery problem that was historic throughout Doug Peterson's tenure. So take a look at that. And keeping the party going with Zoundoff, he had another comment later. Your argument is that they're the same guy based on stats featuring CJ Stroud and Trevor Lawrence. I would compare CJ Stroud's 2024 offensive line with the Jaguars O line in his rookie season, which that was interesting. So talking about the 2021 Jacksonville Jaguars offensive line featuring, okay, Cam Robinson, Andrew Norwell, Brandon Linder, AJ Cann, and Jawan Taylor as a rookie. You're comparing that to the Houston Texans 2024 offensive line with Laramie Tunzel, who was a Pro Bowler left tackle. I mean, he's gone, but let's be very clear. Laramie Tunzel was a Pro Bowler who also had 7 games that he did not allow a single pressure in 2024. Only Lane Johnson had that many games out of all full-time starters. We're talking about that in comparison to the Jacksonville Jaguars rookie season with Cam Robinson, who is right now on the Houston Texans roster. Also, the same Cam Robinson who Jaguars left tackle Walker Little could not beat out for a starting position for multiple seasons. Okay, that's an odd flex, to say that that's a worse offensive line, but I'm not with you so far. The main Jacksonville Jaguars, I guess we'll say positive player, above average, definitely quality player, would have been Brandon Linder, Jacksonville Jaguars center. Like, that's the only guy I can maybe even get on board with you, but he wasn't even close to the level of Laramie Tunzel. And I'm not saying Tunzel was all pro or anything like that, but yeah, he was a Pro Bowl left tackle, who had multiple really good games in this 2024 season. You guys have, Kenyon Green at left guard, Jarrett Patterson at center, who's still there, Shaq Mason, who's, at right guard, no longer there, and Titus Howard, who's now playing guard for the Texans. Some of those 3 of those 5 guys have solid seasons, and 2 of those guys struggle for the Houston Texans. I'm not going to pretend that was not the case. but that's not comparable to the rookie season Jawan Taylor, who was not good. Cam Robinson, who Jacksonville Jaguars fans never wanted to be that 2021, left tackle, but nevertheless, he was one of the better options that they had available at the time. Because again, I mean, you're talking about Walker Little still never being able to supplant him for that role. Andrew Noel, who was never good, and Brandon Linden, who was about average. AJ Can, who was a little, we'll say probably a below average guard. Like, I don't think it's so far ahead, but also the Houston Texans, I think, easily win there just on the back of Larry Tunsil. It was a bad offensive line because of two guys. This was a bad offensive line because it was a bad offensive line that had one good guy. So I think we're in the same shooting range, but don't think I would agree that this was in the same level. It was just rough to watch, and I fully understand that argument, at least for Houston Texans fans. Keeping this thing going, we have Hib Tat Cuff on Facebook. That man discussing Trevor Lawrence is sorry AF. If you look at the teams he beat in that 2022 to 2023 stretch, it wasn't none of them a winning team except probably two at the max. Then when he played the better caliber teams, he started losing. And I've heard a few people try to rewrite history and say that that was the case. And the facts don't care about your feelings. Like, over that 20-game stretch from late 2022 to the first half of 2023, Trevor Lawrence led a reasonably bad Jaguars roster, a reasonably bad Jaguars team who was down double digits like 8 games in that span. They beat the 2022 Dallas Cowboys, the Baltimore Ravens, the LA Chargers, all playoff teams. Uh, in 2023, they beat a 9-win Indianapolis Colts team, not once, but twice. They beat the CJ Stroud led Houston Texans team that we're actually talking about, comparing against. They won against Pittsburgh. They won against Buffalo, and he was beating the Cincinnati Bengals late in the fourth quarter with, I believe, 4 minutes left when he got hurt and left that game. They were up 3 points. That's 9 wins versus playoff teams. Y'all just be saying stuff out here, huh? Like, come on, bro. Prior to that injury in 2023, Trevor Lawrence was playing at an MVP candidate level, like similar to Brock Purdy's candidacy in that same season. And he did it with much less of a supporting cast and like 7 to 8 drop TDs, which we've had on that highlight film. There's like a 3-minute long highlight film featuring drop touchdowns and drop passes. What the Jaguars were near the top of the league in that season. Like, I'm not trying to look for excuses, but this seems very clear that the facts are not on both sides when they're making these arguments, bro. If you have to recreate the history or recreate the history books to support your hate, maybe your hatred is not justified. And I'm going to leave that to football. I'm going to leave that to the social issues. I'm going to leave that to politics. I'll leave that to life, bro. If you have to recreate the history, maybe re-examine your hatred, because maybe it's not justified based on the facts. Let's keep this thing moving, man. Next up, we have T53. I think it has to do largely with Lawrence going into his 5th season now, and he has yet to show a leap in his progression. He's gotten more help in the past 2 seasons and regressed. If Stroud has another less impressive year than his first, he will hear the same. And actually, I think this might be something closer to the truth, or closer to where this thing should land. That comment. So shout out to him for making it. I think that's actually reasonable. Both just want to give a little bit more of a pass to the guy who's done it for less time frame, and only had that one down year versus Trevor Lawrence having those multiple injuries, ending seasons, and having a lot less support in that time frame. So I get that CJ Stroud has had a much better support system overall, but I also do understand the fact that you're going to give a guy a pass, more of a pass, just because he's only had that one down season. You think there's a better chance of him bouncing back, whereas Trevor Lawrence has had multiple where he hasn't, because he only had the end of that 2022 season and the start of that 2023 season to kind of show out, if that makes sense. So, yeah, I can understand that, and I don't consider that hate. I think that's actually a reasonable take. And finally, we have Eric Duval Doss on Twitter says that CJ Stroud has had more stability around him in his first 2 years, kind of like I was just saying, that Trevor has had in pretty much all 4 to 5 years of his career. Non-Jaguar fans only look one-dimensionally. Either they do the eye test or the stats test, but they never look at the whole in the front office and the pieces around him. And that is where this thing lands, in my personal opinion. That is where Wednesday's episode landed. Is if when you're doing the comparison, you got to look at both teams in their in their full scope, and kind of just have a conversation about the front office, the leadership, the run game, the defense, all of it. And I do believe that we did a good job of that. I think in Wednesday's episode with Delugo, with Kyle, the student of the game, Nash, and etc. But I also do think that a lot of these comments aren't watching the full episode. They're not responding to what we said. They just responded to their feelings because fans got feelings because fans are fanatic. But also, I did want to at least have a quick wrap up to also state I've heard a lot about the whole, Trevor Lawrence in this 2025 season. He's running out of excuses. There's no more excuses. This is it. If he doesn't do it now, it's over. His career is over. His life is over. Everything's done. And basically stating that this is the season, the make or break season for Trevor Lawrence and his NFL career. If it don't work now, it's never going to work. And I don't know that I'm fully on board with that thought process just yet. Because injuries and offensive line performance are the primary things at this point in time. We haven't even seen these guys in past that could absolutely derail a quality 2025 season for Trevor Lawrence. Like, that's exactly the same as 2024 CJ Stroud. When they had Stephon Diggs coming in as their primary receiver. Like, with the BTJ injury, and I'm not speaking this into existence. I do not want this to happen. I'm not hoping for anything like that, but we did touch on that in, I believe it was the legal episode on Wednesday, is a Brian Thomas Jr. injury, like a Stephon Diggs injury, could significantly change the ceiling of this team or change the possibilities of where this team lands. That's the big one that I would say, like, hey, this just cannot happen for you to accurately grade that quarterback for this season. And I would also say the same thing for the offensive lines seriously struggling. Uh, that that would change the ball game a little bit. Like, Trevor would then have little reason not to perform to expectations if the offensive line doesn't seriously struggle and Brian Thomas Jr. stays reasonably healthy. But going down the list, we got to acknowledge that there stands a risk for the Jacksonville Jaguars O-line, to not perform up to expectations, and they're going to have to prove it on the field because we got Walker Little, which you already discussed at left tackle. He couldn't beat out Cam Robinson for multiple years, and we in Jacksonville Jaguar fan base make fun of Cam Robinson all the time about how badly he played in Minnesota. Makes fun about it, fun all the time about how he's kind of performed since his late time in Jacksonville. You got left guard Ezra Cleveland, who was traded away from Minnesota when Grant Udinski was on the staff there. There's a conversation at least that needs to be had as far as is he going to be able to perform in this similarly ran offense, under Liam Coen with Grant again on staff. You got center Robert Hainsey, who was a backup Tampa Bay center who struggled in his last starting stint back in the 2023 season. Okay, that was a moderately similar offense, but it was a different offense. So I want to be very clear that Dave Canales' offense was not the same as Liam Coleman's. We know they were different, but nevertheless, he was a backup Tampa Bay center. I mean, let's just call it what it is. We're going across the whole offensive line. Patrick McCarry, he's a versatile but arguably average to slightly above average guard option, and Baltimore allowed him to sign elsewhere. But he does have versatility, and he is going to give you that average to above average play. I will acknowledge that. And you got right tackle Anton Harrison. Anton hasn't had one average to above average run blocking season in his NFL career. I don't think there's anyone who would argue that that's untrue. Like, entering 2025, he has a make it or break it year ahead of him also. So again, we've gone across the entire expected offensive line starting group for the Jacksonville Jaguars O-line, and folks are still saying, hey, there are questions here. And I'm like, no. To say that 2025 is a year for Trevor, no matter the surrounding circumstances, would be both kind of understandable and also kind of insane simultaneously. Like, we haven't even discussed the offensive run game. We ain't discussed the defensive questions that remain, like the defensive line of the secondary. The team has way too many existing core issues and core questions for folks to be like, this one guy, Trevor Lawrence, has no excuses. When, like, obvious, it's obvious that like 9 ways that this could go wrong kind of exists. Right? Like, to be fair to all sides of this argument, Baker Mayfield in 2024 with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers dealt with a pretty similar situation. They had an insane number of injuries to their roster at their offensive skill positions and defensively, and yet Mayfield still found a way to perform. So I want to be clear in saying that. But we also have to ask ourselves in Duval County, is this 2025 Jacksonville Jaguars roster build comparable to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers roster in 2024? Are they? Mm, Is this Jaguars roster build able to withstand that number of injuries that may happen throughout a normal NFL, season? Defensively, no. I don't believe that to be the case. I hope it to be the case, but I don't believe it to be a case. At interior O line, no. Like a run blocker like Graham Barton isn't in the building currently. He's just not. The trenches in Jets are obviously behind in 2025, and the only position group that's close comparatively is the offensive skill guys. If that group takes a hit, like losing BTJ for a number of games, Houston, we have a problem. So don't think that I don't think that Jackson's infrastructure is able to support losing that top end talent like the Bucks did, leaning to more. They kind of lean more into the defensive side of the game, lower scoring games. They lean on the run game. They lean on the tight ends. They are a little bit more versatile in that way than getting their guys the ball. The Jacksonville's not there yet because I think this is a 2-year build overall. So if any of those things do happen, I do currently believe that Trevor Lawrence would have an excuse, and I don't think he's out, quote unquote, of excuses. I think that will keep the national media guys, in their, pitchforks and everything else out, rah 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 rah, saying all these things about him. But at the end of the day, there's absolutely reasons why this can go off the rails, and it still be not because of Trevor Lawrence's play. So that's why you have to be a tape watcher. That's kind of why you have to be a ball knower. And you can't just look at the stats. You have to look at the overall picture combined for both teams. That's the Texans and the Jaguars. And I know we do that because we watch too many Houston Texans games. And I know we do that in Jacksonville because we watch every single one at least 2 to 3 times. So if you tell me I'm wrong, tell me why I'm wrong by doing the same level of work. Otherwise, you're just talking, bro. And like y'all say, facts don't care about feelings. But then give me the facts. Let's talk about it. Duval. We're going to have you guys covered on Wednesday's Duval Dive. Well, I'm sure we'll have another very fun conversation. Keep it locked in.